The tears had already stained Victoria Parker's cheeks when the Oregon-bound wagon train stopped for water at Silver Creek, Nevada Territory, in 1868. Her stepfather and mother had shoved her aboard 3 days earlier, determined to marry her off to the son of a wealthy landowner who waited at the end of the trail, a man she'd never met, but whose reputation for cruelty had reached even their small Illinois town. Victoria clutched the locket around her neck, the only memento of her late father, as she slipped away from the camp, seeking a moment of solitude. At 20 years old, she had never imagined her life would come to this, traded away like cattle, her dreams of independence crushed beneath the wheels of her family's ambition. "Those tears are washing away too much pretty for a day like this," a deep voice said from behind her. Victoria spun around, instinctively reaching for the small knife hidden in her boot, another gift from her father, who had taught her that a woman alone needed protection. A tall man stood there, hat in hand, keeping a respectful distance. He wore worn leather chaps over denim pants, a faded red bandana around his neck, and a gun belt that had seen better days. Despite his rugged appearance, his eyes held kindness. "I mean no harm, miss," he said, raising his hand slightly. "Name's Nathan Everett. I run cattle about 10 miles south of here." Victoria quickly wiped away her tears. "I'm not in need of conversation, Mr. Everett. Most folks crying alone by a creek are in need of something," he replied, staying where he was. "Maybe it's just someone to listen." The wagon master's whistle blew in the distance. 15 minutes until departure. Victoria's shoulders slumped. 15 minutes until she continued on a journey toward a future she dreaded more than death itself. "They're forcing you to go," Nathan observed, his voice quiet. Victoria looked at him sharply. "How would you know that? Seen it before. Young woman, nice clothes but no happiness, watching the horizon like it's the edge of the world." He shrugged. "I notice things." "What would a cowboy know of a woman's troubles?" Victoria asked bitterly. "Enough to know when someone's being taken somewhere against their will," he answered. "There might be another choice if you're brave enough to consider it." Victoria scoffed. "What choice? To trust a stranger I met by a creek?" "No," Nathan said seriously. "The choice to decide your own fate." "I need help at my ranch. Housekeeper left last month to marry. Pay is fair, work is honest, and you'd answer to no one but yourself." He gestured toward the wagons. "Seems better than whatever's waiting at the end of that trail." The whistle blew again. Victoria glanced back toward the wagon train, then at the tall cowboy standing before her. "Why would you help me?" "My sister was forced into a marriage that killed her spirit long before consumption took her body," Nathan said, his eyes darkening with memory. "I promised myself I'd never stand by watching that happen to another if I could help it." Victoria studied him carefully. She had learned to read men's intentions from an early age, a necessary skill for survival. Nathan Everett's gaze was steady, his stance non-threatening. "If I find your arrangement unsatisfactory, will you hinder my departure?" she asked. "You'll be free to leave anytime with wages in hand," he promised. "My ranch is 3 hours from Carson City by horse. Stagecoach runs through twice a week." The wagon master's voice called out for final boarding. Victoria looked toward the train, then back at Nathan. In that moment, she made her choice. "I need to retrieve my belongings," she said. Nathan nodded. "I'll wait with the horses behind that stand of cottonwoods. If you don't come in 15 minutes, I'll know you changed your mind." Victoria hurried back to the wagons. Her mother and stepfather were engaged in conversation with another family, paying her no mind as usual. She slipped into their wagon and grabbed her carpet bag, already packed with her most precious possessions, a habit she'd developed after her mother's hasty remarriage. She added a small pouch of money she'd saved from selling embroidery work, her father's compass, and a small leather-bound journal. With one last look at her mother, a woman who had long ago chosen security over maternal love, Victoria disappeared into the trees where Nathan waited with 2 horses. "You're certain?" he asked as she approached. Victoria took a deep breath. "No, but I'm certain about what awaits me if I stay with that wagon train." Nathan helped her mount a chestnut mare, and they rode out, keeping to the trees until the wagon train was well out of sight. Victoria didn't look back. They rode south across the Nevada Territory, the vast landscape unfolding before them like an ocean of sage and dust. Nathan proved to be a quiet companion, speaking only to point out landmarks or to check if she needed rest. By late afternoon, Victoria's body ached from the unaccustomed hours in the saddle, but she refused to complain. "Just beyond that ridge," Nathan said eventually, pointing to a distant line of hills. "Silver Pines Ranch." As they crested the hill, Victoria saw a modest spread nestled in a valley with a small stream cutting through it. A two-story house built of sturdy pine logs stood at its center, with a barn and several outbuildings nearby. Cattle grazed in the distance and a small vegetable garden stretched behind the house. "It's not much compared to some spreads," Nathan said, watching her reaction, "but it's paid for and the water rights are solid. You built this yourself?" Victoria asked, genuinely impressed by the neat, well-maintained property. "Started 6 years ago with nothing but 20 head of cattle and more stubbornness than sense," he replied with a hint of pride. "Now I'm up to 200 head and thinking about horses next year." As they approached the house, a younger man emerged from the barn. He bore enough resemblance to Nathan to be a relation. "That's my brother, Daniel," Nathan explained. "He helps with the ranch when he's not working his claim in the hills. He's harmless, but he'll keep his distance if you prefer." Daniel waved as they dismounted. "Brought company, Nate," he called, his eyes curious but respectful as he noted Victoria. "Miss Parker needs employment and a safe place," Nathan replied simply. "She'll be taking over housekeeping duties." Daniel nodded, seemingly unsurprised by his brother's actions. "Good to meet you, Miss Parker. We eat like wolves and clean like bears, so you have your work cut out." Victoria found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. "I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Everett. Call me Daniel." "Having two Mr. Everetts around gets confusing," he said with an easy grin before turning to his brother. "Stew's almost ready. I'll add another bowl." Nathan showed Victoria to a small but clean room at the back of the house. "It's not fancy, but it's yours." "Locks on the inside," he added, tapping the solid door. "Your privacy will be respected here." Victoria set her bag on the narrow bed. "Thank you, Mr. Everett." "Nathan," he corrected gently. "Rest a bit before supper. Tomorrow's soon enough to talk about duties and such." Left alone, Victoria sank onto the bed, the events of the day catching up to her. She had abandoned her family, fled a planned marriage, and placed her trust in a stranger. Yet somehow, in this simple room with its handmade quilt and curtains stirring in the breeze, she felt more at peace than she had in years. That evening, Victoria joined the brothers for a simple but hearty stew. The conversation flowed easily, with Daniel sharing amusing stories about local characters and Nathan occasionally adding quiet observations. Neither man asked about her past or her reasons for leaving the wagon train, a courtesy that Victoria deeply appreciated. As weeks passed, Victoria settled into life at Silver Pines Ranch. Her duties were straightforward: cooking, cleaning, mending, and tending the garden. Nathan paid her fairly each week, as promised, setting the coins on the kitchen table without ceremony. Victoria learned that Nathan was 32, a veteran of the Civil War who had headed west seeking peace after the bloodshed. Daniel, 26, had followed his brother after their parents died of influenza. The brothers were well respected in the territory for their fair dealings and willingness to help neighbors in need. Spring turned to summer, and Victoria found herself watching Nathan when he thought no one was looking. She noticed the gentle way he handled young calves, the patient manner he used with skittish horses, and how he always made sure she had fresh water for the garden before she asked. One evening in late July, Victoria sat on the porch mending one of Nathan's shirts. The setting sun cast long shadows across the valley, and the air was thick with the scent of pine and sage. "Mind if I join you?" Nathan asked, stepping onto the porch with 2 cups of coffee. Victoria nodded, accepting the offered cup. "It's cooler out here." "Summer's holding on tight this year," he agreed, settling into a chair nearby. "Daniel says you've got the garden producing better than we've ever seen." "My father taught me about plants," Victoria said, feeling comfortable enough to share a piece of her past. "He believed a person who could grow food would never truly be poor." "Sounds like a wise man," Nathan observed. "He was," Victoria said softly. "He died when I was 15. My mother remarried less than a year later." Nathan was quiet for a moment. And your stepfather arranged the marriage that had you on that wagon train. Victoria nodded, focusing on her stitches. To a man twice my age in Oregon, a widower with a reputation for breaking horses and wives with equal enthusiasm, Nathan's hand tightened around his coffee cup. I'm sorry. Don't be, Victoria replied, meeting his gaze directly. If not for that arrangement, I wouldn't be here now. Something unspoken passed between them, a current of understanding that made Victoria's heart beat faster. Nathan broke the moment first, clearing his throat and looking out across the land. Cattle buyers coming through next week, he said, thinking of selling 30 head if the price is right. Victoria resumed her mending, content with the comfortable silence that fell between them. Later that night, alone in her room, she realized she hadn't thought of leaving in weeks. Somehow, Silver Pines had begun to feel like home. The next morning, Victoria rose early to start bread dough. As she worked, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking out the window, she saw 3 riders coming up the path, strangers, their horses dusty from the trail. Nathan emerged from the barn, walking calmly toward the approaching men. Victoria moved to the door, suddenly uneasy. Looking for a woman named Victoria Parker, the lead rider announced without preamble. Stepfather's offering a reward for information. Victoria's blood ran cold. She recognized the middle rider as one of the men from the wagon train. No one by that name here, Nathan replied evenly, his stance relaxed but his hand near his gun. Funny thing, the man said, leaning forward in his saddle. Word in Carson City is you rode off with a young woman matching her description some months back. Daniel appeared from the side of the house, rifle casually in hand. Morning, gentlemen, something we can help you with. The tension in the air thickened. Victoria stepped fully onto the porch, decision made. I'm Victoria Parker, she announced clearly, and I'm here of my own free will. The riders turned toward her. Nathan moved slightly, positioning himself between Victoria and the men. Your stepfather wants you back, the lead rider said. Says you're promised to someone. I'm promised to no one, Victoria replied firmly. I'm 20 years old and legally free to choose my own path. The man who recognized her spat on the ground. There's $50 for returning you. Then you're losing money with every minute you stay, Daniel commented dryly. The ladies made her choice clear. The lead rider assessed the situation, 2 armed men defending their home, a woman clearly not interested in being rescued, and a long ride back to whoever had sent them. Finally, he nodded. No disrespect intended, he said to Victoria. Just doing a job. Tell my stepfather I'm well and employed, Victoria replied, and that any further attempts to retrieve me will be met with the same response. The riders departed and Nathan turned to Victoria. You all right, she nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. They won't be the last. My stepfather is not a man who accepts defeat easily. Then we'll be ready, Nathan said simply. No one's taking you anywhere you don't want to go. That evening, after Daniel had gone to check his mining claim, Victoria found Nathan on the porch, cleaning his rifle with methodical care. Thank you for standing with me today, she said, sitting beside him. No need for thanks, he replied. No decent man would do otherwise. Victoria watched his hands work, strong and capable. When you found me by that creek, why did you really offer me a position? The truth, please. Nathan set the rifle aside and met her gaze directly. Because I recognized something in you, something that reminded me of myself after the war, someone who needed a chance to decide their own future. And now, Victoria asked softly, what do you see now? Nathan's eyes traveled over her face, lingering on her lips. A woman any man would be proud to stand beside, he answered honestly. A woman I've grown to care for more than I intended. Victoria's heart quickened. I never thanked you properly for saving me that day. You didn't need saving, Nathan corrected her. You just needed a choice. The harvest moon rose full and golden over Silver Pines as autumn painted the hills in russet and gold. Victoria had been at the ranch for nearly 6 months, and in that time, what had begun as gratitude toward Nathan had blossomed into deeper feelings. They hadn't spoken directly of these feelings since that night on the porch, both seemingly content to let their relationship develop naturally through shared work and quiet evenings. One crisp October morning, Victoria rode out with Nathan to check on a heifer that had wandered from the herd. They found the young cow grazing contentedly in a sheltered meadow. "She's got the right idea," Nathan commented, dismounting near a clear stream that cut through the meadow. "Good grass, fresh water, smart girl." Victoria slid from her horse and stretched her legs. Over the months, she had become a confident rider, another skill she treasured from her new life. "It's beautiful here," she said, taking in the golden aspen trees surrounding the meadow. Nathan nodded, watching her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "Victoria," he began, then hesitated. "I've been meaning to ask you something." Before he could continue, a shot rang out, echoing across the meadow. Nathan instinctively pushed Victoria behind him as three riders emerged from the tree line. Victoria's heart sank as she recognized her stepfather, Frederick Simmons, leading the group. Beside him rode his foreman and another man she didn't recognize. "There she is," Frederick called out, his voice carrying the familiar edge that had terrorized Victoria's youth. "Victoria, this foolishness ends now." Nathan's hand rested on his gun. "Mr. Simmons, I presume," he said calmly. "Your stepdaughter isn't interested in returning with you." Frederick's face darkened with anger. "This doesn't concern you, Cowboy. The girl has obligations." Victoria stepped out from behind Nathan, her fear giving way to determination. "I have no obligations to you or anyone you've arranged for me to marry." "You ungrateful," Frederick started, then controlled himself. "The Carmichael arrangement is still valid. He's willing to overlook your indiscretion, given your youth and naivety." "Indiscretion," Victoria repeated incredulously. "I've worked honestly for my keep, and I'm neither young nor naive enough to be sold into marriage with a man known for breaking his wife's spirit." Frederick's expression hardened. "You're coming with me, willing or not." He nodded to his men, who began to spread out. Nathan moved Victoria toward the horses. "When I say run, you ride for home," he murmured. "Daniel will be there." "I won't leave you," Victoria whispered back. "3 against 1 isn't sporting," a new voice called out, and Daniel emerged from the trees behind them, rifle raised. "Though I reckon my brother and I could even those odds right quick." Frederick assessed the situation, his eyes calculating. "The law will support a father retrieving his daughter." "Stepfather," Victoria corrected. "And the law in the Nevada Territory respects a woman's right to choose her own path. Sheriff Daniels in Carson City already has my sworn statement that I left of my own free will." This was true. Nathan had insisted she file such a document after the first men came looking for her. It had seemed unnecessary at the time, but Victoria was grateful for his foresight now. Frederick's jaw tightened. "This isn't over," he threatened, but Victoria could see the defeat in his eyes. Without legal grounds to force her return, he had no leverage besides violence, and he wasn't prepared to risk that against 2 armed men. "It is over," Victoria stated firmly. "Return to Illinois, Frederick. I release you from any obligation you feel toward me, and I expect the same courtesy in return." After a tense standoff, Frederick and his men finally departed, leaving Victoria trembling with the aftermath of confrontation. Nathan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, solid and reassuring. "You were magnificent," he said softly. "I was terrified," she admitted. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Nathan replied. "It's standing your ground despite it." Daniel approached, leading his horse. "I'll follow them a ways, make sure they're truly leaving," he offered. "You two head on back." Left alone in the meadow, Nathan turned to Victoria. "Before we were interrupted, I was about to ask you something important." Victoria's heart quickened. "Yes, your position as housekeeper," Nathan began carefully. "I'm thinking it might be time for a change." Victoria's stomach dropped. After all this time, was he asking her to leave? "I see," she managed, fighting to keep her voice steady. Nathan must have seen her distress because he quickly took her hands in his. "That came out all wrong," he said, a rare flush coloring his tanned face. "What I mean to say is, I don't want you as my housekeeper anymore. I want you as my wife, if you'll have me." Victoria stared at him in shock. "Your wife?" "I love you, Victoria," Nathan said simply, his eyes never leaving hers. "I think I started falling for you that first day by the creek when you stood tall despite your tears. I've watched you build a life here, not just surviving but thriving. You've turned this ranch into a home, and I can't imagine my future without you in it." Tears welled in Victoria's eyes, but these were far different from those shed by the creek months ago. "I love you too," she whispered. I never expected to find freedom and love in the same person. Nathan cupped her face gently. Is that a yes? Yes, Victoria answered, her heart overflowing. 1,000 times yes. Nathan's kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of all that was to come. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. We should head back, Nathan said, though he seemed reluctant to release her. Daniel will worry. They rode home side by side, their horses matching pace as naturally as their riders' hearts had aligned. The ranch came into view just as the sun began its descent, painting the pine-covered hills in golden light. It looks different somehow, Victoria observed. Nathan smiled. How so? More permanent, she replied thoughtfully. More like forever. They were married 2 weeks later in Carson City, with Daniel and several neighboring ranchers as witnesses. Victoria wore a simple blue dress she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Nathan couldn't take his eyes off her throughout the ceremony, his usual reserve melting into unabashed adoration. That winter was the happiest of Victoria's life. The three of them, Victoria, Nathan, and Daniel, formed a family bound not by obligation, but by choice and love. Daniel announced his intention to build his own cabin near his claim come spring, giving the newlyweds their privacy while remaining close enough for family suppers and assistance with the ranch. By the following autumn, Victoria's joyful news added to their happiness. A child would join their family by spring. Nathan's reaction was everything Victoria could have hoped for, equal parts wonder, pride, and tenderness. I never thought I'd be blessed with so much, he confessed one evening as they sat by the fire, his hand gently resting on her growing belly. After the war, I figured my lot was to live quiet and alone. And now, Victoria asked, covering his hand with hers. Now I have everything a man could dream of, Nathan replied. A woman who chose me, land that sustains us, and a future taking shape before my eyes. When their son was born in April of 1870, they named him Thomas after Victoria's father. He had Nathan's serious eyes but Victoria's ready smile, a perfect blend of his parents. As Victoria nursed him one evening on the porch where she and Nathan had first acknowledged their feelings, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The forced departure that had seemed like the end of her dreams had instead been the beginning of a life richer than she could have imagined. Nathan joined her, gently touching their son's downy head. Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Everett. Victoria smiled up at her husband. I was thinking about choices, how the hardest ones often lead us exactly where we need to be. Like choosing to trust a stranger by a creek, Nathan asked with a knowing smile. Like choosing to offer another path to a crying woman, Victoria countered softly. Nathan leaned down to kiss her, then their son. Best choice I ever made, he murmured against her hair. Though I think you would have found your way eventually, with or without me. Victoria shook her head. Perhaps, but this is the path I was meant to walk beside you, building something that's ours by choice, not obligation. The sun set over Silver Pines Ranch, casting long shadows across the land they both loved. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully, the garden Victoria had planted flourished, and the foundation for a small schoolhouse was taking shape, Nathan's surprise gift for their growing community. Victoria Parker had once been forced onto a wagon headed west against her will. But fate, courage, and a cowboy with kind eyes had offered her another choice, one that had led to love, family, and a freedom more precious than anything she could have imagined on that tearful day by Silver Creek. As darkness fell, Victoria and Nathan Everett sat together on their porch, their son sleeping peacefully between them, their future stretching before them as vast and promising as the western sky.